Hey everyone, Pumpkin Player here, and welcome to the first episode of the show. It's something I've always wanted to do, and here it is finally. So what I'll be looking at is just classic gems, underrated dogs, and popular hits of PC games. And what better way to start off than with this little beauty here. Myth 2 Soulblighter is a fun and amazing game. I bet most of you would never have heard of this game before. It's a tactical RTS game developed in 1998 by the one and only Bungie. Yes, they did make something other than the famed Halo series. In fact, there is a nod to the Myth series, as the difficulty system is pretty much similar. There's timid on one end of the scale for you kids and new gamers to strategy, and on the other end there is legendary. Perfect for all you SM players and glory seekers that want their names etched in the Myth forums. And this is not one of those games that just changes the damage multiplier by enemies, it also changes the gameplay experience in more ways than one. But we'll get onto that later. Myth 2 is the second game in the Myth trilogy and arguably the best because it just carries on of what made Myth 1 great, with some fantastic level design, story and gameplay mechanics. Myth 3, well, it just didn't live up to its predecessor and is probably better off 10 feet under the earth with no tombstone to mark it. So what do you do in Myth 2? Well, you control a squad, and I use that term pretty loosely, of individual combat units completing various objectives such as rescuing kidnapped villagers to storming a fort overrun by the forces of darkness. There's variety enough that it doesn't feel like the missions don't matter, and most are quite memorable. In one mission, your band are being chased by the undead army, in which you have to escape through a bridge and destroy it behind you. It's a race against time as the undead vanguard try to cut you off from the front. More often than not, you'll probably sometimes need to leave some of your guys behind to hold the enemy off. I mean, the mission comes first of course, but that's just probably me, and I'm sure some of you Meth veterans would probably give me disapproving glances. I should mention that there is no base building whatsoever. What you get is the units you're given in each mission. And once they start pushing up daisies, they're gone for the rest of the mission, but don't let that put you off. The story is one of the game's strong points. It's well written and brilliantly voiced in the form of a journal of an unknown soldier at the beginning of every mission. You feel like you're sharing his journey.
Monday, September 15th, Gonan's Bridge. Leave it for the torches, lads, and make haste for Gonan. Kruniak's words soon spread through the entire camp, and men began hurrying in all directions. Moments before, the runner sent to warn Tallow had returned, only to tell us that Tallow, along with every other village and town along the northern border of Forest Heart, had been ravaged by the undead. Even worse, the enemy is amassing a huge army less than a day's march from here. Kruniak believes they are coming to recapture the keep. The commander has sent me and a group of dwarves ahead of our main force to stuff Gonan like a turkey. I was unsure of his meaning until we reached Gonan's Bridge, and the dwarves began to load the bridge with satchel charges. Apparently he plans to destroy the bridge behind us once we are all across, to make pursuit more difficult. Kruniak and some other men stayed behind to put the keep to the torch, thus preventing it from falling back into the hands of the enemy. As we began our ascent into the foothills of Cloudspine, I turned back and saw the blaze well underway. And that is when I noticed movement around the keep. I thought I knew what fear was, or that I had known fear. I was wrong. This night I have experienced true fear. The army of the dark is upon us, and it has no end. They march toward us shoulder to shoulder for as far as the eye can see. The very earth must be crying out at the damnable weight of them.
You learn more about the history of the Fallen Lords, as they are the antagonists that lead the Dark Army. The whole narrative is almost in the same vein as the Black Company novel series by Glenn Cook, and I do recommend you read them. After successfully completing missions, your units gain veterancy, meaning that they become a little better at killing, and they are carried over from mission to mission. You become attached to your guys, especially when you are already halfway through the game. All the blood and mud you trudge through. That said, you get the neat little option to rename any unit to whatever you want. Add your friends in, your favourite family members, or that bully from your childhood. From the typical sword and shield wielding warriors to Molotov Throwing dwarves, there are enough units that have a purpose in the game, and you can visibly see it. Warriors are a balance of defense and speed, good for all-round situations. Archers can pick off targets from afar, but can be easily gibbed in melee. Dwarves are slow but great at crowd control. You get other units, but I'll let you explore their uses. The Dark have their own units with their cliched zombie, while weak alone can become a big problem in large numbers. The Soulless are the Dark's range units, who can pick your units from afar, but can be dispatched easily up close. Oh, and because they are spectral, they can traverse over any terrain. Ghouls, who are like ape creatures, can flank your units and pick off any stragglers. Oh yeah, and a lot of things die in this game, almost to the point of realism. And what I mean by that is a few hits with a warrior's sword will cast off any undead, and likewise a few lightning bolts from a fetch, which is this twisted otherworldly being, will pretty much fry half your squad. Thankfully though, you have healer units that have limited medicine to patch up your guys to stave off death, at least for a few more minutes until your next ambush. This is myth at its core, using your men at their strengths, exploiting the terrain, and whispering a prayer in the meantime. You can't just rush the enemy because A, your melee units will literally get in the way of each other, B, your range units will end up hitting their own guys, and C, chances are the AI will outflank you, taking a 9-inch rusty pole and tearing you a new one. Scout with one guy, have archers position themselves on a hill so they can have greater range, and tell your melee units to form a loose formation so they can go toe-to-toe with the enemy. This is a tactical game after all. The game utilises a physics engine in that arrows will hit trees and other solid objects in their way, meaning positioning your ranged units is important. The Dwarven Molotov cocktails have a chance of fizzling out in snowy and wet terrain, and the Dwarves' short arms prevent them from throwing them high uphill, as they will just roll back to the now surprised about to be blown up dwarves. There is plenty of replayability to have. With 5 very different difficulty levels, this not only changes how easily the enemy can kill you, but also changes the number of enemy spawns and the enemy types. In one map, for example, you might have to face only wights and thralls, normal but crank it up to legendary, and you might see soulless, meaning whatever strategy you employed before will now need to be tweaked. There are plenty of user mods available, ranging from changing your units to Civil War soldiers to whole complete campaigns like playing in medieval Japan. Want to do a father and son activity? Or forget baseball or Counter-Strike, load up the child-friendly Lego mod and induct them into the game. I suppose the downsides to this game are the controls and the amount of micromanagement you have to do. While this can be great for all you control freaks and puppet masters, it can be frustrating trying to organise your units in the middle of a battle, especially if you are new to this game. And your unit AI isn't that great, as sometimes your units will get stuck or have pathfinding issues, but thankfully there is a time control option at your fingertips so you can slow down time for when you need to dish out critical orders. Graphics wise, it looks alright. I have to say the maps will not look appealing to the modern gamer, however, the units are well designed from my biased point of view. There's just a nostalgic charm in seeing 2D sprite characters in the game. The animations are pretty much faultless, but I tell you what, the gore graphics are quite graphic. Body parts are thrown everywhere, leaving a strawberry trail, and your poor berserker has just been fired by a lightning spell, and you can see his cooked and blackened carcass is still smoking. What was once a green serene field is now a bloody mess of arms, armour and bodies. A grim reminder of how well or badly you fought. The music in this is totally fitting with the overall theme of the game. Just listen to this. It's mellow, it's dark and it's deep. Just another really nice touch that makes the whole experience a bit more engaging. The voice acting, however, leaves something to be desired. I mean, the unit voices are okay when you tell them to move and attack, etc. It's just in the cutscenes which I feel are a bit of a letdown.
If he isn't stopped, he'll shatter the cloud spine.
Yeah, pretty bland. The level design on the whole is superb. Places look memorable for the most part, but there are parts of the map that are just incredibly bland, especially in the arid locations. I mean, if more detail was added, like rock sprites or some cattle skulls, or just something just to fill in that eye candy basket. Also, some maps are large, especially in the catacombs, and tame levels with few enemies to deal with. It just lengthens the pace unnecessarily as you're watching a unit walking from one side of the map to the other, trying to find the place you're supposed to reach. I haven't touched the multiplayer, but it is there for all your friendship-breaking LAN parties. The Myth community is still active, so by all means introduce yourself on the forums and get a match going. You can find the link to the forums in the description below. Overall, Myth 2 is fantastic. It's memorable for its story, its missions and hard gameplay. There's such a satisfying feeling of beating mission after mission, taking your veteran soldiers with you, and heartbreaking to see them make a defiant last stand while you lead your men to safety. I do recommend you try it if you're into challenging strategy games or just curious to see Bungie's earlier successes, and it's free to download. Just click on the link in the description. And be sure to grab the 1.8 patch just to make sure your game runs well on your modern system. And that's the end of my review. Let me know your thoughts, I'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to like and subscribe.